The clock tower in London struck midnight, the sound rolling across the docks like a funeral bell. M. Flush stood on the mahogany deck of the Aether Runner, his hand resting on the cold brass railing. Beneath his boots, the ship hummed with a rhythmic, metallic pulse. Steam hissed from the copper pipes lining the gunnels, curling into the damp night air. He pulled a complex device from his pocket. It was not a watch of gears and springs, but a frame of glowing vacuum tubes that flickered with a soft amber light. He tapped the glass. The tubes pulsed in sync with his own heartbeat. He had exactly 52 weeks to circle the globe. The race began now. He moved to the helm, his fingers dancing over the brass levers. He pushed the primary throttle forward. The twin propellers groaned, then began to spin, blurring into silver discs that sliced through the fog. The ship shuddered, the hull groaning. He watched the cobblestones of London fall away, replaced by the dark, swirling clouds of the horizon. The engine roared, signaling the start. 2 weeks into the journey, the world below turned into a jagged expanse of white and gray. The Alps rose like broken teeth, forcing the Aether Runner to climb. The air grew thin and bit at his lungs. Without warning, a wall of black cloud slammed into the ship. A bolt of lightning struck the brass ribs above, the discharge tearing a jagged hole in the outer canvas. The ship lurched, the nose dropping toward the peaks. M. Flush lunged for the rigging, his hands gripping the freezing metal lines as the vessel bucked. He pulled himself upward, the wind screaming through the struts. He reached the tear, the fabric flapping violently against the frame. He drew the mechanical patch gun from his belt, the device heavy and cold. He braced his feet against the swaying rib, aimed the nozzle at the center of the rip, and squeezed the trigger. With a sharp, metallic click, the gun fired a glob of molten rubber into the gap. The material hissed as it hit the freezing air, hardening instantly into a seal. The ship groaned, the nose lifted, and the sudden drag vanished. He hung there for a moment, listening to the engine pulse back to a steady rhythm. The storm raged on, but the Aether Runner held its course, carving a path through the peaks. 4 months into the journey, the landscape shifted to a vast, shimmering expanse of dunes. The Sahara stretched to the horizon, a furnace of heat that radiated upward. Without warning, the wind turned, whipping sand into a dense, choking wall. The Aether Runner hit the grit like a physical barrier. The intake valves, designed for clean air, began to whine and stutter. Inside the cabin, the rhythmic pulse of the propellers faltered, replaced by a grinding, metallic screech. M. Flush dropped his tools and scrambled into the engine room. The air inside was thick with dust, stinging his eyes and coating his skin. He lunged for the pressure manifold, his hands sliding against the grease-slicked levers. The engine groaned, the internal temperature spiking as the turbines choked. He gripped the main pressure release, his knuckles white, and wrenched it toward the emergency reverse setting. The pipes shrieked. A blast of superheated steam erupted from the intake vents, a violent, white-hot roar that forced the trapped grit out in a cloud of debris. The ship tilted sharply, the hull vibrating as the propellers caught the air once more. With a final, shuddering surge, the Aether Runner broke through the wall of sand. The final stretch across the Pacific was a relentless test of endurance. The horizon vanished behind a wall of gray, churning water. Without warning, a rogue gale slammed into the Aether Runner, a force so absolute it felt like the sky itself was collapsing. The ship groaned, the wooden hull twisting under the pressure of the wind. M. Flush watched the altimeter needle drop, the red line flickering toward the dark, hungry surface of the ocean. The propellers whined, struggling against the downdraft. He lunged for the ballast release levers, his hands slamming against the cold iron. He pulled the first, then the second, the heavy steel weights dropping away into the abyss. The ship shuddered, a sudden, violent jolt as the weight vanished. It was not enough. The hull dipped, the bottom of the vessel skimming the crests of the waves. Salt spray erupted against the wood, a deafening roar of water meeting timber. He grabbed the final emergency release, his feet braced against the vibrating deck, and yanked it with every ounce of strength. The Aether Runner lurched, Through the thick, gray smog of the city, the jagged silhouette of the London skyline finally cut through the haze. Flush gripped the throttle lever, his muscles coiled, and shoved it to the absolute limit. The engine roared, a deep, guttural vibration. Propellers blurred into a single silver disc, slicing through the air with a high-pitched whine. He watched the landing pad approach. The Aether Runner dipped, nosediving toward the dock. He pulled the release, the anchor chain rattling against the wood with a violent, metallic scream. The ship slammed into the dock, the hull shuddering as it settled. Flush lunged off the deck, his boots hitting the solid stone. He pulled his pocket watch. The final second ticked away. He stood still, chest heaving. The race was over.